He's definitely there or thereabouts, but sometimes after some difficult games, he struggles to bounce back. If he has 1 or 2 bad losses, often he writes off the tournament. So, yeah, Sam, he's one of the best players out there these days, but still maybe less consistent than some of the top guys.
You know, on that subject, I have seen, I saw at the American Championships that Sam pulled out a number. This during the players' draw for the opening ceremony. He pulled out a number that he didn't want, and he was like so visibly angry and upset with himself. And he was like, "Oh my!" It kind of felt like he'd already decided then it was not going to be a good tournament for him, just because he pulled out the wrong number.
Yeah,
cool.
It's all about the details. Chess is his life, and it always has been for Sam Shankland. Meanwhile, it's the Italian game. One of the most popular openings these days in elite circles, and a very topical position here. This is very well known, this type of position. It's just quite quiet, all the pawns, all the pieces on the board, but it will liven up later. The Italian game, that's one thing that when I was young, it didn't have maybe the best reputation. It was regarded as kind of a lazy person's opening. And then all these new ideas were discovered in the last 10 years alone, and everybody's playing it with both colours. It's very rich and very dynamic.
Sam's done some of the best chessable courses as well, some of the best received, and it looks like he's getting ready to film another one there. He's got the green screen already.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
it's like, right, maybe that's why he's a bit angry. It's like, this is getting in the way of my chessball recording.
Yeah.
He's getting another course out.
He has so many. He has D4, Sicilian, Berlin, Semi-Slav. I know he has another one coming out as well.
Yeah, and they're really very good reviews on all of them. I mean, he's such a dedicated opening researcher that they're only going to be good material what he does. So,
Coming for your record of 27 chessable courses, Simon.
he's got a long way to go until he gets there. A long way to go yet. So,
Do you have any more chessable courses in the pipeline?
probably.
Simon?
Yeah. I just breed them. I just breed chessball, not kids. Chessball courses.
Yeah.
You know?
You have though, Jovanka. You have something. You're talking about maybe making a chessable course. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't quite worked out the details. But yeah,
I can imagine that would be something you would do really well at. Teaching chess, having a good chessable course.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun. Yeah. The only thing is that it's a lot of work as well.
Yeah, that's true.
So, yeah. I mean, the great thing about doing these type of courses is that's so fantastic for your chess, because in order to communicate something effectively, you actually have to understand it very well. And that's something that they say when you want to break down information or when you have something very complicated, the best thing you can do, you know, and also to get it to stick into your memory is actually to teach it to someone low rated than you. And if they can understand it, then, okay, you're doing a good job.
Yeah, and Sam Shankland, with all his chessable courses, well, he must be expert in many parts of the game and many openings, David.
That's right, and Sam is also an exception because he practices what he preaches. Whatever chessable course he makes, he will play it. He will use his own games as kind of the foundation for those chessable courses. And, OK, in this one, we've seen a lot of trades. All of the bishops are about to leave the board. And the main imbalance is that black has doubled e-pawns. If you look in front of the black king on the e-file, black has doubled pawns there. So long-term, maybe a weakness. Black lacks flexibility with his central pawns, but it's a minimal thing right now, especially while queens and major pieces remain. So, OK, Mishra, I'm wondering what he's thinking about. Usually you want to take this bishop back with your knight. And, yeah, it's just very, very tense. There's a lot of life left. A lot of manoeuvring maybe ahead.
It's incredible now, like, if you think about it, how all these players playing here, they have a course out. You know, if you go back, like, 50 years, can you just imagine all the guys having a video course out and still playing? You know, like,
Fischer would never share secrets.
yeah, exactly. Bobby Fischer with his, chessball course while he's playing, or it's just it's a different world, isn't it? Really, that you can get so much information at any level, quickly.
But is it almost like writing a book? Because I know it's a lot of work. There's hours and hours of video.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's just as hard, I'd say, as writing a book, because you've got to write it, check the lines, and then present the course as well. And you've got to present it in a way that people understand it. So there's a lot of elements to doing it, yeah.
And Carl, I suspect maybe in prisons that online stuff such as Chessable, playing online, that's not the easiest maybe for the prisoners.
No, because many don't get access to the internet for obvious reasons. So that's where books come in.
Yeah.
Still, there is a need for books, of course, and magazines, and it's very useful. I'm thinking about, I don't know if Gary Kasparov ever did a Chessable course, I don't know, but I do remember the first VHS videos that came out.
Sorry, what?
Exactly. I'm here to take you back.
VHS? What are VHSs?
Put them in and fast forward, and Kasparov was on one. This was classic, and he's on one talking about explaining what you're thinking to people. And I can't remember the opponent, and somebody was interviewing him in a game against Karpov, and he said, well, what did you do here, Gary? And he said, well, it's quite easy. I play bishop f2, g3, I play knight f5, g4, g5, and it's just big advantage and win. And the guy said to him, well, could you please just explain that for the audience? No. It's just obvious win. And I paid £15 for that. And I think, well, where? I can't see. So, you have to have a talent. You can be as good as you want, but, tell us, Gary, we've paid the money. So that's where nowadays this is just invaluable.
Not everyone can teach, I guess.
Yeah, not even the best player in the world at the time. I mean, in some ways, just confusing sometimes. So, yeah, it sees too much.
Yeah, and you mentioned books, Kai. I think the biggest kind of successful period of Sam Shankland's career was just after he wrote a few books on pawn structures. And then I think within months he became American champion ahead of those players, Caruana, So, Nakamura. I think, as Jovanka mentioned, putting the work in, creating chessable courses, creating books, that's actually the modern way of improving and working on one's game. Why just spend hours, tapping with a computer passively, just like trying to memorize? Why not actively try and write things down into words? Just trying to kind of explain your thought processes, and that helps you understand better. I know that's been the case with me for commentary and with writing. I find I understand chess better than ever now, but especially better than when I was young, when I was purely calculating. I know when I was young, I couldn't explain why certain moves were good, certain pawn structures were good, because I would maybe recognize them, but I didn't understand myself. And these top players,
interesting.
That's why they understand so well now, and that's why they're able to communicate their thoughts through modes like Chessable.
But obviously then putting all of that stuff out on Chessable, it is money for the top chess players, for anyone doing it, so that is a great thing. But it also reveals your strengths, everything you're thinking about, something maybe you found out. Is that a problem at all?
It's a fine line.
Yeah,
it's a fine line, but at the same time, this information is out there for everyone to discover because, after all, everyone is playing chess. Yeah. Everyone now has computers, and the top players all have supercomputers. So, I think it's a good thing to kind of get your information out there. And, we on the tour the last season, we had that fantastic example where Wesley So created a Chessable course, and he then won 2 tournaments on the back of it. Yeah. And even beat he was just playing his course against Magnus.
Yeah.
Turns out Magnus hadn't done the research. Magnus hadn't gone onto Chessable and studied Wesley's course, and Wesley was just using exactly the material on there. So it's one thing revealing secrets, but your opponents have extra work to do to actually go and study those notes.
Come in and watch my 10-hour Chessable course, Magnus Carlsen.
I can remember one grandmaster telling me a story. This is before Chessable courses, books where you got your information from, and they weren't always correct because computers weren't as strong. And I remember this grandmaster telling me he wrote a book, but he left out the best line. So he left out a winning line in a very complicated, because he said, well, I don't want people playing this against me. So he wrote this book on purpose. And then, but he left out a winning line, so it's a little bit hidden. And then, he said he got an email from someone, and this guy said, "Well, I followed your book, and it's just, it's just losing. What's going on?" And he's like, "Oh, yeah, sorry about that." So there was a bit of craftiness before with some players hiding the lines and trying to trick readers. That doesn't happen anymore because of computers, but it did happen. It did used to happen. So
it's still very strange, isn't it? Because it is a war game, and you're effectively giving away the details of your military capability. Yeah. Why would you do that? If you still got aspirations to achieve things, why would you do that? Yeah. It's strange.
It is a little
I understand why sometimes.
Because there's something wonderful about having your name on paper and for everyone to read and for people just to look at your work.
I think that's okay, but unless you're aspiring to get somewhere, if you're targeted on becoming a world champ or something like this, you can do that later. Yeah. This is the now. this. I want this. I'll give those details later. Kasparov would never do it, would he? He would have
Magnus
said,
has done it.
"Keep my-"
He was doing it at his prime. You know, there's like Kasparov teaches chess, and then there's also someone else. Quite a few players. Bobby Fischer did my 60 men.
They weren't giving away.
Well, they didn't give his big database,
No,
though.
that's true.
He didn't give his database away, did he?
No,
Caspo.
no chance.
No.
The position, meanwhile, is still quite stable, still manoeuvring. But Carl, how about the process of writing your books? Was that, I mean, how did you kind of come up with the idea originally, and how did you kind of find that whole?
The prison one was quite easy because I looked to see if there was anything like it out there. Where can I find information about chess in prisons? And there wasn't. This is back 2014 I started doing it. And then prisoners wrote to me, and I would write certain things when I go into prisons. And I thought, why don't I just put all of this together so that prisoners can have, I'll call it the chess Bible, if you like.
Yeah.
That's not me being sort of self-effacing, but one book that they can learn about the history of chess, the moves of chess, great games, you know, how to study, how to motivate yourself, all those things that you might want in one book, in one cell. And it came together quite easily, to be fair. So that was great. The other book, which is really my chess memoir.
Yeah, this is a thicker book.
Yeah, it's about how, and we must all be able to identify how chess has helped me through my own life. When I found it when I was 12 years old, I didn't achieve anything until I became school champion. And at that moment, you know, I knew I could do something. I wasn't the prefect because I was never really the good boy, but I managed to get an honours tie, which my prefect friend could never get. And I thought, you know what, when I stood on stage that day, when I was 16, and I got the trophy and I got the tie, I could not have been more proud, and I still am. And it's just a school title, but everybody has a moment in their life when they know they can do something, achieve something, and that's the same for the prisoners as well. So you just got to keep believing in yourself and working at it. You need a bit of luck as well.
And I have to say, this Cole's story is absolutely fantastic. It's a rip-roaring tale, and you know, sometimes your jaw will drop when you read about the adventures that Cole has had in his life. And
I'm looking forward to reading it. And I can see there's few chessboards in this, so it's not a classical chess book with all the chessboard and the notation.
No. It's just
It's a
Almost like a novel.
Yeah, very cool. All right, and well, the big moments is in this game. Is that coming up, David?
I hope so, because it's been very quiet up to this
Yeah.
point, and maybe we can jump in to just discuss what is costing the players so much time on the clock, what they're thinking about, what's going on in their mind, and it's just so stable right now. White's pieces are nicely centralised. I like what Mishra's done with his rooks, getting ready for the position to open up. The knights are pretty good right now. The white queen as well, on a nice, decent, active square. Maybe creating some annoying pressure on this diagonal. The problem, though, for Mishra is what to do next. Sometimes in chess, your position is just too nice, and it's hard to improve. One concept would be maybe pushing forward in the centre with your pawns, opening up the position, but are you ready? That's the big question. We might well see a trade, a capture of pawns here, and now the question is, if you take with the knight, we'll see the knights come off the board, maybe the queens will come off the board next, everything will get traded off. But if you take with the pawn, this is a pawn sacrifice, and black will capture your pawn in the middle of the board. You just aren't ready, and therefore Mishra says, okay, I'm not ready, I'm going to retreat. And that's the thing in chess. It's so hard for a human to just sit still, do nothing, and wait for the action to happen. He steps back with his knight.
It's very hard for Mishra to sit still, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's got
literally sit
literally,
still.
yeah.
Instead, he's worsened his knight, at least temporarily. Maybe he'll improve it on the next move by bringing it next to its fellow knight, guard his king. But yeah, it's so hard to imagine any real progress being made. I like what Sam's done, actually. Black is rock solid, and I'm expecting him to bring his other rook to this f-file. And actually, with black, you could potentially create some attack. Another idea would be to bring your knight to the edge of the board. This is quite a common plan at all levels. I know when I was young, when I was kind of an amateur player and just coming through the ranks, I dreamt of putting a knight on this square, just kind of the building the bridges for an attack later on. And yeah, lots of choice. Black's pawn structure is the only real imbalance, this double pawns, but they're not a weakness, at least for now.
And do you want to know a fun fact? So we were talking about Chessable courses. Sam Shankland, he has 4 of them. His thoughts, his plans, all out there on Chessable. And stop me, of course, David, if something shocking happens. But Mishra, so this is a message from Garrett from Chessable. And he writes to me and says, Mishra became a grandmaster by switching from playing 1e4 to 1d4. And the repertoire he used to attain his grandmaster title was Sam Shankland's Chessable course. Lifetime repertoire is 1d4, and Mishra also started playing Shankland's semi-Slav versus Black against 1d4. So if anyone knows Shankland's repertoire, it's Mishra.
Yeah, I
Playing here with
suspected
white.
that much because, you know, when I was looking at Mishra's games, well, actually, that's not the story. The story is I was actually using Sam Shankland's repertoire myself, and there was a lot of Abhimanyu Mishra's games. And I was like, oh, someone has been watching Shankland.
Aha.
Snap, snap. And, yeah.
The opening he used in the last game against Magnus, that was something Sam Shankland had played before as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that must be unsettling for Sam. Every time he researches his own openings, he says he sees Mishra's name. So maybe that's why Sam is playing something that I haven't actually seen him play before. But
He's also got his own course out, I think, Mishra, as well, on Chessable. Yeah. So it's worth, if you want to know how this kid became the youngest grandmaster ever, he's got a Chessable course where he talks about that. So that's also very interesting, I think, for the sparring players.
It's funny, you mentioned he became a grandmaster from switching from 1e4 to d4. Here he switched back to 1e4. But he's finally played d4, not on move 1, move 18.
Perfect timing, actually.
And talking about courses, I just want to read out one comment from Elmer Johnson, who has a kind of comment aimed at Simon. He says, Simon, you made the black lion. Where is the white tiger, the blue elephant, the green dragonfly, and the rest of the unusually coloured animal courses?
In production. Give it another couple of weeks, they'll be in your email. So
27 new courses to come.
we actually just, funnily enough, it's funny, a new course came out yesterday. Can you believe it? You were talking about it, and I think it was kind of one I did jointly, but it was one of the ones I'm happiest about. It wasn't my course, it was one I did with Keith Arkell, and it was really Keith Arkell's course on how he became such an amazing endgame player. And it's a very interesting course because it avoids variations. So I get really bored with, I'll be honest, long variations. I can't be doing with them. I like simple explanations about why'd you do this, why'd you do that. So Keith's course, Arkell's endings, which has just come out in Chessable, is I think a really good way to become, as you said, all-round player, wasn't it? Not just an opening player, but a rounded player. So, yeah, that's course number 28.
There are golden nuggets in there. I just saw Keith at the English Championships a couple of weeks ago, and I said to him, I'd read the book. The first point was the book, and little nuggets like, at what point in an endgame does he move his f-pawn? You've got these points. I never move my f-pawn until a certain point, which you'll have to look at the course to understand. But, you know, those little nuggets, of course. But when you're just a normal tournament player like me, you then have to understand how you proceed from there. But it's all, they've given away all this information.
I know.
Take it.
Probably the greatest endgame player in British history, or one of the top few.
Really?
That's what he's known for, yeah, certainly. His great endgame play. And he's basically made a career from it. You know, since he was a kid to where he is now, he's just won endings, and that's made his life, you know, his house and everything, really.
It's just the same game over and over again. He wins every time. I don't understand.
Computer
always says 0.0 for 100 moves.
Yeah.
And then a few moves later, he wins.
And it's always the same kind of idea.
Pattern,
so he's put it in a course now. That's the thing. He's actually put those ideas. He just does the same setup, the same ideas, same win. Exactly. It's amazing.
But you know something? I actually have seen some of Keith's attacks.
Amazing.
And they're ferocious.
Yeah.
Absolutely, some fantastic games from him.
The thing is, to be a great endgame player, you have to calculate really, really well. Firstly, to survive to the endgame, but even in endgames, to finish things off, it's all about calculation, the last stage. So yeah, he can do everything.
Yeah, his game against Julian Hodgson actually is in that course. He had a win where he crushed Julian Hodgson in like 25 moves when Julian Hodgson, I think, was one of the top 20 players in the world. So it does have the odd attacky game in there as well. But,
What was the name of this course?
Arkal's Endings. After Keith Arkal.
This is the course for me. Not that I make it to many endgames, but if I do,
yeah, it's a nice, easy like to not too many deep lines, but just explanations. So it's yeah.
And talking of explanations, a couple of things have happened in the game, so maybe we should jump in to show. And a big moment now for Sam Shankland. He's thinking, just to rewind, we left it in this position. Black had just doubled up the rooks. Actually, some attacking potential here along this line for Black. So Mishra thought, OK, it's time to clarify the situation. No time to wait anymore. And he pushed his pawn forward. We saw a trade in the centre, and knights came off the board as well. And now the queens are staring down at each other. It's Black's move, Shankland's move. Does he trade? He allows the exchange to happen. I was going to say, if he wants to win this game, then maybe he can keep the queens on. Just move the queen out of the way. Next move, you can move your knight, and the black rooks do have attacking potential on this line. But, OK, he chooses in this moment to push in the centre. I trust him because he's great at kind of navigating pawn structures, but this does allow white to push forward and block things up. Also, white, when to trade, when not to trade. The tension might continue for a while. Just to explain to viewers at home, it looks like this is quite a good trade for black in this situation. White has doubled isolated pawns now, but this one white pawn completely locks down this black pawn. This black pawn now is a backward pawn because any time it marches forward 1 squares or 2 squares, it's just going to be captured by the white pawn, en passant even. So this is a backward pawn for eternity, and it's actually quite hard to mobilize it later. So interesting decision in terms of pawn structures. Worsening your opponent's pawn structure, but also worsening your own in the process. So instead, pushing this pawn forward, I'm expecting Mishra to do the same, lock things up, and we'll see a situation where white has more space in the centre, but this block structure means it's all about manoeuvring. And whose knight is going to be better? That's the big question.
Interesting. Abhimanyu Mishra thinking he is down to 7 minutes. They played equally fast, these two players, in this game. And will we have a winner, or will it be a draw?
I don't know. I think all 3 results are possible, and it's actually probably going to hinge on these next few moves, because the line that David showed to me looked nice for white. But if Abhimanyu plays inaccurately, and somehow, there's the queens get traded off, and black is allowed to be very mobile with his pawns on the left side of the board, I think maybe Sam Shankland could be better. So it's a critical moment in the game.
Yeah, it's not going to swing in just one move. It's all going to be about long-term planning. It's going to be a series of small inaccuracies from one side, maybe. Or, OK, this exchange of pawns makes some sense as well. But now, after black recaptures, for example, if black takes this pawn back with his own pawn, white is left with an isolated pawn in the centre of the board. So long-term, I wasn't so keen on this one.
It's rather unambitious, I feel, this move, because you're making exchanges and you could have grabbed some more space by just pushing forwards, controlling more squares. And it seems like this is trying to simplify things a little too much to my liking here. So
he has done that a couple of times, Mishra. Even when he was winning yesterday against Ding, for example, he's trying to take the most simple option. Maybe that's just a natural thing. I think I did the same when I was young, facing opponents rated 200 points higher. OK, the queens do finally come off, and now, after this capture with the black knight, OK, interesting. Now, both sides have weaknesses. Black's rooks, though, have opened up, so black's rooks are threatening to come down and take white's pawn on the f2 square. I think that pawn needs to push or be defended. Black does, however, have an isolated pawn of his own on the e6 square, a target for white's rook in the centre. Weaknesses everywhere.
Yeah, that's true. Normally, I kind of judge these type of positions by doing some simple maths of like, black has one weakness. That's the pawn on e6. White, on the other hand, has 3 pawns with no friends. And those guys could be, well, vulnerable if targeted.
The 2 white b pawns, I mentioned they did clamp down on one of black's pawns, but those 2 white b pawns, if the black knight can hop around maybe and start attacking them, they could be difficult to defend. So long term, I could definitely see this going wrong for white. And OK, Mishra, he's not too far behind on the clock for now. So OK, keeping his pawns nice and safe, blocking the black rooks. That's a good start.
Yeah.
So you mentioned David, Sam Shankland. He is a former US champion. Has Mishra even started playing those US championships?
I think he's been playing in different sections of the US Championship. There are junior tournaments and qualifying events, but the US Championship itself, it's very elite. It's just the top 10 or 12 players. Okay, we lost the players there. They're coming back. But yeah, you have to qualify for the US Championship either by rating or through kind of a process of other events.
Okay.
So it might be a few years before Mishra can compete. Unfortunately, in the US, there are just so many players. I think you need to be 2,650 rating-wise, 2,650 at least to qualify, maybe even closer to 2,700 these days.
Whoa.
I'm not sure I'd even get into the US Championship. It's that strong these days.
Yeah. And how about in England? All of you are English superstars. Are there any English youngsters coming up that you are a little bit excited about, that everyone is paying a little bit extra attention to?
There's one, Shreyas Royal. I don't know how old he is. David knows him a lot better than I do, but
he's basically the same age as Abhimanyu Mishra, and he's not as far along in the development process, but he's almost international master level.
Okay.
So maybe in a few years he'll be grandmaster and take it from there.
Yeah.
To be honest, there's not enough.
Yeah, there's
I
not
mean,
enough.
if you compare it to other countries,
Compared to India, Uzbekistan, US.
Uzbekistan as well, yeah.
Uzbekistan, so many players.
China. I mean, if you go back to the 1970s, I mean, 80s, England were like number 2 in the world pretty much. I mean, they came second in the Olympiad, and it has to be said since then. I mean, we have some great players, don't get me wrong, some really good, I mean, players, young players. I mean, I know you're friends with Marcus Harvey, but he's not a junior anymore. He's a very talented player, but we don't really have enough coming through. I would, compared to other countries, it's just not there.
the sad fact of the matter is that we just don't have enough funding. And, you know, a lot of these countries, like, for instance, Uzbekistan, you know, the government is actually pumping in, like, millions of dollars to aid their chess players. Meanwhile, in the UK, you know, we're struggling on...
Even travel to tournaments, maybe.
Yeah, to struggle.
It's all self-funded, really. That's the thing. If you want to become a good player in England, since we were juniors even, I mean, we had to get support from our parents, which is massive, you know, costs a lot of money to go to tournaments, and you never really been much government support or support elsewhere from sponsors.
Imagine Abdusatorov when he won the World Rapid Championship. The president of Uzbekistan gave him a free apartment. I mean, and a huge chunk of cash to support his development. So that would never happen in the UK.
England.
Boris Johnson giving us...
Open up your wallet. And, well, if there is not, you know, right now, a big prodigy coming up, we did talk a little bit before the show, Carl. There could be a very good team in, what was it? Online World Prison Championship.
Yep, correct. The second World Prison Online Chess Championships will be held this October.
And you have an English team.
Well, there are Malcolm Payne and the Chess Schools and Communities charity are running 3. I'm trying to run 1 from the middle of England, and we're going to be competing against the rest of the world, and it's a mega opportunity, of course, for prisoners. Imagine being in prison and saying I've represented my country at something.
Play the World Championship.
Fantastic.
Incredible.
And that is just how far up the agenda. We seem to be doing more in prisons than we do in schools. So, you know, if we made a really great player out of prison, of course, they couldn't be let out to play. What we need to get more chess into not just prisons, but schools. It's very contentious, but I have no idea why we don't introduce some into a curriculum. Why can't we just do something? Yeah. But anyway, it's just very annoying. But it's where we are.
Yeah. You know, one player who I really want to see play in the online prisons is a recent inmate of HMP Wandsworth, Boris Becker, who plays chess.
That's true.
Yes.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, it would be great.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
He's actually he's quite a decent chess player.
Yes.
Yeah, I think he played Kasparov once and he went for Scholar's Mate or something in a bit. So he's maybe not the strongest, but I mean, it's a bit sad, isn't it, that he's actually in a tough prison.
No, that is very sad, actually.
It doesn't seem right to me, but anyway.
You'll have to bring us up to speed, Carl, on how your team does.
Yes, I mean, people can go to FIDE, to the FIDE website, and look at chess. It's called the Chess for Freedom, and just have a look. Just go through the FIDE website, have a look at what's happening. There's a guy called Mikhail Korenman in America, in the sheriff's office there, Sheriff Dart as well. Lots of characters running this. And I say again, it's tremendous that around the world chess is going high up the agenda. That's all I ever wanted was, can we get chess on the prison agenda? And before, prisons would say, well, why we can't afford to do it. And I would convince them and say, you can't afford not to do it. Because you ask, what's the purpose of prison? I mean, what is the purpose of prison? Many people say just to keep people away. No, it's to help people when they come back out to not go back in again. And we do that through education, probably influence from other people. And chess, of course, covers the whole spectrum. I see there's a move or two coming up here.
Yeah. Is anything dramatic happening on the board, David? It seems like a calm game, or okay.
Could be. It's heading in Shankland's direction, and that's all because of the pawn structure. I mentioned he's written books on pawn structures, and that's really paying off right now. If we do jump in and just show what has happened on the last few turns, it is turning now. I don't think White should have rushed. There was a moment where Black's knight looked very, very strong, but I think you have to play around it. I think you have to bring your own knight into a strong square. Instead, trading off the set of knights has accentuated the weakness of White's pawns. And this move by Shankland, a really nice one, bringing his rook forward, hitting this weakness. We mentioned that White has 3 weaknesses here, this pawn, and this pawn, which cannot be defended by other pawns. And now after White blocked, trying to exchange rooks, Shankland has said, OK, I'm allowing the exchange, but on my terms. And he brings his rook across one square, staring down at this isolated pawn. So now there's tension. For example, a rook trade, I don't think helps White at all. Black's rook has an easy path towards these weaknesses. Black's king as well opened up to run into the center of the board. Yet if White doesn't trade rooks, if he takes this pawn instead, then Black is simply going to go pawn hunting. Rook takes pawn, and it's 3 connected pawns here. White, meanwhile, has these 2 isolated pawns, these big, big weaknesses. It's going to be hard to save this one and this one long term. I mean, it's one-sided. It's just playing for 2 results, as we call it in chess. If White defends really well, maybe he'll get a draw, but Black is the only one who can really win this game.
Sam Shankland, he has a bad start to the day. He lost both his games, so a win here is exactly what he needs. Would it mean a lot to Sam, do you think, David, to qualify for the knockouts in this strong tournament?
Definitely. We've mentioned in the past he's his own... trading rooks, I didn't like this, but he is his own harshest critic, Sam, and anytime he doesn't perform up to expectations, you can see him tweet about it. He beats himself up about it. He tries to push himself even more. But when he does well, which has happened quite a lot lately, that kind of drives him, I think, even more. And it's all about confidence with Sam. And this game, I think, will help boost his confidence if he does take it and win it. The Black King, meanwhile, trying to make its way towards the left side of the board where all of the targets lie.
So it's funny how you get different types of players. Like Sam is a very emotional player, and you get a number of players like that. I'd say I'm probably similar. When things are going well, you can use that energy, and that energy, transforms onto your moves on the board. But when things are going badly, it can have a very negative effect. And we saw Magnus in the last round. He's maybe the opposite. He can bounce back. He can put his emotions aside. So it can be a strength and certainly a weakness at the same time. And it's trying to control that, and that's again something that chess does. It makes you control that. I know that some of my videos are in some prisons as well. Some of my YouTube videos, some guys have got their hands on.
I actually received a letter from a man who said, I've been watching Mr. Williams's DVDs or something, and I don't know how they did it, but they do stream Simon's work into some cells. So he's there like a ghost in the night sometimes. And of course, they're noisy places, aren't they, prisons? So sometimes they say, I was awake all night with the noise in the next cell. It's Simon talking about Harry the H porn. Keeping our prison population awake.
Yeah, it's quite a weird thought, isn't it?
It's there. They all know you now.
Yeah, I know. But big in prisons.
The one time I went in, I was playing a simultaneous, and at some point I played H4, and everyone was like, Harry.
Superstar in prisons.
Yeah, that's it. Big in prisons. So
very cool. Inspiring for everyone, Simon.
Meanwhile, a lot of moves, and actually White's rook has managed to get active, very active, taking a pawn, but Black's rook equally active, and now it's all about the quality of pawns. Black's A pawn, it's not about Harry now, it's about Alice, the A pawn, marching down. It's only a few squares away from promotion, and how does White's rook get back to stop it? I think this is very dangerous now. White's pawns, meanwhile, it's hard to push them forward. They'll just get traded off. No passed pawns for White in this position. But Black does have the best pawn, and that's the A pawn. Watch out for that A5 pawn running down the board. White's king at some point is going to have to retreat. But black's rook as well is okay. I like this decision, at least trying to go active, giving up a pawn in the process. If black takes this pawn with his own pawn, the white king does have a route forward. But
there is a check, though.
black's
I
rook
mean,
can maybe slide
I was
across.
thinking about this move as well, and I was like, yeah, you know, pawn takes, like you say, the white king steps forward, but the rook checks, and you're just giving up a pawn.
So say takes, then this is very nice for white. Suddenly you can jump into the position, you can start grabbing some pawns, maybe even some checkmating threats, for example. Here, white's rook wants to come up and trap the black king. The white king keeps it under guard. But unfortunately, this check is very annoying, and you're going to take this pawn back with the black rook.
Very confusing, these endings, though, because, I mean, I think Mishra's done a very good job in a very tricky position. He's trying to activate, even if he gives away a pawn or two. That is one of the most important things in a rook ending, just to get active with your rook and with your king. He's managing to do that, and it's a little bit murky, right? I mean, I think you have to go for this pawn if you're in time, and you've got to pass pawn yourself now. Bit murky. A little bit murky, maybe?
I don't know. I was a little bit afraid of this. I thought maybe the king should kind of keep an eye on Alice, the A-pawn, and the white rook should be the one, like, trying to source some...
Yeah, the king definitely needed to stay just within range of this pawn, because in this position, at least you can go active with your rook. You can start grabbing some stuff. In the current position, if we fast forward, what's happened is that white's king has gone after this pawn, but still, I mean, this guy is going to start running at some point. You can start giving a check.
Maybe you can win immediately here with some clever idea of just trying to swap the rooks off at some point.
Yeah, there we see actually Stockfish, the computer, does confirm black has one move that's winning outright. The others maybe give white a chance, and it's actually the most obvious move in the position, I feel. Just a check, and next move, grabbing this pawn. For example, wherever the white king goes, you take, and I mean, these three connected pawns are going to win the game. White does have one hope, and that's this guy, but it does feel a bit slow. Black's king, at the very least, will slide across and start guarding against it.
It's looking good for Sam.
Some calculation to be done, but looking very, very good for black if he finds this move.
But you know, actually, despite it winning a material, I'm not sure it's that human move. Because, you know...
What else? There's no other...
Yeah, but somehow it's like the idea of that white pawn advancing and that's it becoming a race.
But I think by process of elimination, black had no other logical moves. I mean, if you push the black A-pawn, then the white rook is actually going to slide back along the fourth rank and go and kind of chase it. So I think this was just no other option for Sam.
And we did see Pragnananda on fire today. He started the day winning against Magnus Carlsen, then a draw against Pantalari Krishna, fellow Englishman, and now a win in this round against Gawain Jones. So Pragnananda currently in second place in the tournament. He has woken up the 16-year-old. And here we go, the pawn, the rook moving.
Yeah, so now it's a race. White's F-pawn has to start running, nothing else to do. And black will try and stop that. If black can stop all the white pawns, then black will win with his majority. The black pawns are further away from white's army than the white pawns are from black's army, so that I think that's going to be the deciding factor. Also, the more pawns, the better in general. So Shankland in charge.
And unfortunately, Gawain Jones, your favorite, of course, being English, he is still struggling. He is in bottom of the table after this loss as well. Only 2 points so far for Gawain. But it is a super strong tournament.
Yeah, very, very unfortunate. And it just seems like both Gawain and his study partner, Niels, just doesn't seem to be working because they've actually been playing the same openings.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Gawain Jones and Niels, they've worked together in the past. They play this tournament, they're playing exactly the same stuff.
Really?
And also, when I played Niels Grandelius in a match just a couple of months ago, I knew instantly that Gawain had been all over the preparation, that because he knows me so well from the English chess circuit, he had been supplying Niels with ideas. So it's interesting, but yeah, unfortunately, not going so well in this tournament for them.
No.
And OK, white's rook has to take a step back, just guarding the third rank, stopping black's A-pawn from continuing its advance.
Look how much more exciting the end game is compared to the opening. Exactly. This is where the thrills begin and the roller coaster.
Now it's all about a race, blunders.
Yeah, this is the fun bit. This is where everybody stands around a board and looks when you're playing your game. They don't stand around in the opening. I mean, look at the pulsating head there. Yeah. It's all going on.
The veins popping.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can definitely see it on Sam. He is interested in this position right now. Leaning forwards. Is he also talking to himself a little bit, I think?
Sam does that. I've played him many times over the board, and he's always kind of encouraging himself. It's like you see tennis players shout, like, come on.
Yeah.
He's doing that to himself quite often.
I mean, isn't there a straightforward way how to kind of push that A-pawn through to its destination? I was just thinking, move the rook 2 squares.
OK, challenge rooks.
Yes.
Offer a trade. And that's what Sam's calculating. Black's rook can come down and fight for the 3rd rank. It's either very, very good or it's a mistake, and he plays it. He plays it. Very natural. If we see a rook trade now, if White's rook goes and captures the black rook, Black's pawn is quicker than White's f-pawn. Yeah, I think you're right, Ivanka. It's just logical.
Maybe White's going to queen this way, though, at least, that gives him some chances, I guess. I mean, you just got to just count how many squares it takes to queen. Let's say that White just pushes the pawn now. Both sides might queen.
Let's say we trade rooks, and then it's a race.
Sorry, so change rooks first.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't do it. Okay.
Yeah, here it would have been 2 squares away for Black, but also 2 squares away for White. And we see a new set of queens on the board, but at the very end, Black has these 2 pawns, so Black should win this game. Maybe with this in mind, Mishra decided to keep rooks on, but now in this position, Black's pawns are going to start rolling.
Such a nice move from Sam Shankland there, just to give a check, force the king onto a very inconvenient square. Look at it, it's in front of its own pawn.
Yeah, White's king did not want to walk in this path. Actually, I've noticed in rook endgames, checks are nearly always a good idea. People forget them sometimes. They get too focused on pushing pawns, but checks are now, White's pawn is too far away. Black's pawns are simply going to win the game. And here we go. It's not only the A pawn, but once the white rook comes back, the B pawn is going to join it. This one's almost game over now.
13
Black pawn's too strong.
For Abhimanyu to try to find a defense, which is going to be difficult because it's not there. OK, but I like this move, Well, if Freddie, the F-pawn, can't move, utilise, is it Gary?
Gary the G pawn.
Gary the G-pawn.
Yep, got to push him.
And I noticed in Magnus's win against Mishra, actually, it was the H-pawn that won the game, but it started as Gary. It became Harry and won.
Oh.
So a bit of a name change there.
Uh-huh.
But, yeah.
When Gary met Harry.
When Gary met Harry.
Do you think Sam will sort of celebrate in any way with winning this game, or will he be very calm?
He often celebrates.
Yeah?
He's got to give it a little celebrate, hasn't he? I think,
Yeah,
so.
you have to enjoy your victories. I mean, it's such a big psychological mistake just to kind of, treat your victories with no emotion.
Yeah.
You've got to encourage the physiological reaction
But saying
of
that,
happiness.
Ivanka, I remember once, I probably said this before, but I remember losing to a very strong player when I was leading this tournament, and he started celebrating basically, I was leading the tournament, it was a big tournament, and his girlfriend came over and they started kissing and like, get in there, son, whoa, and I was like, oh my God, just go away. Don't want to see this. You've lost an important game. So I think, in a real tournament situation, you should probably do it away from the opponent.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be like, get in there, it's just have a bit of respect. So I feel.
Yeah.
So.
But, I'm kind of sometimes, you get so accustomed to winning that you feel nothing. And I think that that's wrong. I think you have to, you have to acknowledge, that your victories mean something, regardless of who you're playing against.
Yeah.
It's my one problem with the top chess players in the world. Even when they win, they're never happy. And OK, here we go. White's pawn is 1 square away from promoting, but Black's rook can do the dirty work, and it goes all the way back to stop the white pawn. Black's rook is actually just going to give itself up for Gary the G-pawn, and Black's 2 will break through the white rook. Black's just going to make a new queen, and nothing much to do, unfortunately. The black rook can just go away here. Any safe square along the 8th rank, and White is powerless. White's H-pawn just too far away, and Black has won this race. Not much else to say, unfortunately.
Yeah.
No, that's it. And a good victory there. So
I have to say for Mishra, though, he's always spending all his time. He's always playing a few more moves,
And he's setting some traps,
Yeah.
There is a trick on the board.
learning, I guess, at least.
He's learning.
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing when you're young. Never, ever resign, because, maybe once every 20 games, once every 30 games, your opponent will relax too soon, slip up. Unfortunately, his trap to distract the black rook doesn't work.
No.
White makes a new queen, but Black makes a new queen as well. And there are no checks, no safe checks for White in this position. Black has an extra rook. And Sam, you can see on his face, on his camera, he knows he's about to win this game.
And remember, 3 points for a win in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour, 1 point for a draw, 0 points for losses. So a win here will take Sam to 10 points, and that is good news for him, in hopes of qualifying for knockout.
Also, why resign when it's possible to mouse slip here? Sam could mouse slip his queen. You never know. We've seen stranger things happen on the tour.
Very optimistic.
Yeah, unlikely.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very simple mating pattern here. This is one of the first checkmating patterns you learn. I think you use the queen and the rook. They call it either, well, is it the lawnmower? I call it the guillotine. I quite like the guillotine.
Saw another name for it recently. The ladder checkmate.
A ladder,
Yeah, when it's done with rooks, you can call it the rook roller.